I have a little pamphlet here I printed out on the internet. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. Free thinkers, a broader umbrella term that embraces a window of unorthodoxy, religious dissent, skepticism, and unconventional thinking. It's no surprise that many influential thinkers and creative types have come from the ranks of these intellectual revolutionaries. Organized religion tends to reward people for not thinking creatively or critically, but for reciting and defending the dogmas of the previous generation. Throughout human history, it has consistently been true that hidebound theocracies have been mired in poverty, backwardness, and intellectual stagnation, whereas the most dramatic advances have come about in times and places where people have had the freedom to think for themselves, to freely question, and to freely debate others. The lives of the men and women recounted throughout history bear testimony to this. Dissent. As I was working on the theory of stellar metamorphosis, I realized that dissent is very, very, very looked down upon, because dissent has power over the status quo. Dissent doesn't care what the status quo is. A person who dissents basically is on their own schedule, on their own program. Those are the kind of people that I think are going to lead us in the future. Those people who can stand up for what's right and to question the authority on matters concerning science, on matters concerning government, and social sciences across the board. Because we're not going to be able to make the changes we need unless we can have those people with the courage to stand up for what they believe is right, regardless of if it's right or wrong. And that dissenting voice is protected by the First Amendment. It's the freedom of speech. I also printed out another article here. Let's see. This man here, his name was Holmes, I think Holmes. It was in the Abrams versus the United States case back in the early 1900s. It was Justice Holmes. And he put it very eloquently that the life of a magnificent man, he was a magnificent man who was smart enough to understand how wrong people can be. So when you do make laws, you should be able to make adjustments to them. You should be able to change them to ways that actually benefit people and the changing times, if you will. Basically, he was going over the fact that, sure, a politician can make an idea true and say that's how it is, but times change. Everybody's opinion changes. People grow older, they die, and then new generations of people come up and they replace those old ideas with new ones. It's a natural state of events. But in science, what happened was they've become stagnant. They've become more like an organized religion. Here it says, it rewards people for not thinking creatively or critically, but for reciting and defending the dogmas of the previous generation. Really think about that. Really think about what that means. It means that science is worse now than politics. A lot of the people in Natural Philosophy Alliance that I remember talking to, they equated science to being more along the political lines, like only saying as much as it took to get the grants and the funds and this and that and whatnot, and less about how things were actually working and if the ideas actually made any sense, which is essential for a scientific theory. In case you didn't realize that, scientific theory has to make sense If it doesn't make any sense, then it's really nothing. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It's as simple as that. But when you have these people making these theories back in like the early 1900s, they were good ideas at the time. But as technology progressed, we started to make discoveries which completely conflicted with what was believed at the time. So basically you have a law that's set into place, such as a law of thermodynamics or a law of gravity or a law of this or that. And none of the scientists are willing to change because it's become orthodox. And like a religion, basically. You go to school, you go to graduate school, and you learn all these things about the people that came before you have learned, and you take it as truth, and then nothing can shake that truth. It becomes a dogma. So naturally, when I first made the discovery that Earth is an ancient star, oh man, like, it shook me. It shook me in a way, in a good way at first, into realizing that things aren't what they seem. But eventually over time, what happened is that I tried to share the discovery, and I really got some hatred for it. I really got nailed. Basically, nailed and buried and thrown sand on and forgotten. Like, that's the way they treat new ideas, because the dissenters, such as myself, are basically the opposite, the absolute opposite of the status quo people. The people who want things to be the way they want them to be, and nobody should rock the boat, and this is how things are supposed to work. And that's the real powerful lesson. Another real powerful lesson that I learned is that even if you are educated, yes, I was educated at Florida State. I've taken physics classes, I've taken biology, I've taken chemistry, I've taken, history classes. I'm only 8 credits away from a degree in what's called human communication. So it's not exactly a physics degree, but I have taken all those classes. I have taken science classes. I know how that works. But what I didn't know was what I'm learning now, is that if you have a dissenting view that goes against orthodoxy, regardless of how right you think it is, regardless of how incredible it is, you're going to be ridiculed. You're going to be told that you're crazy. Attacks on your personality and who you are going to happen. You're going to have labels put on you. People are going to open up the psychology books, basically, and try to find every single little cognitive fallacy they can find and just place all those cognitive fallacies all over you as if you're just some idiot. As if you're some random internet troll that is just there to mix things up and to cause people to be angry. But that was never the point with me. The point with me was I was surprised that people are so obsessed with thinking that they know how things work that when somebody else comes into the picture to try to show them a new alternative viewpoint, that they'll reject it out of hand. They won't give you the time of day. They'll just say, oh, you're crazy. Oh, look at this crazy person. And then they'll place labels on you and ridicule you. And that's basically what science is amounted to now. And which is why the astronomy and astrophysics has basically stagnated. Now they're just nitpicking little things. Like I remember I saw on the Wikipedia page for classification, stellar classification, and they started to name all these different types of stars and give them all labels, and it was just getting out of hand, And there was another editor that just tried to clean it up a little bit to condense it all, but that wasn't the real point. The point was that they weren't trying to think outside the box. They were trying to keep everything into this little bit of information where somebody just come in, read it, and then go off and not ever question what was actually being written on that Wikipedia page. It's like a mental attitude that a lot of those educated people have. Educated, I say educated because I don't really mean educated, I mean overeducated. They're educated to the point to where even if there were new ideas, it wouldn't really matter because they've already been told what's real. They don't have any room for new ideas. So I guess that really sums it up. I'm just really honestly surprised. I'm really shocked over this 3 years that the most powerful lesson in all this it had nothing to do with actually making a discovery. It had everything to do with understanding why things are the way they are inside of organized institutions. The institution, its structure, has certain, assumptions. And those assumptions are on the very base of that institution. And then they build everything in that institution off those root assumptions. And one of the root assumptions that I realized that they had was inside of astronomy and astrophysics and geophysics. And that assumption was that stars are bright and hot and big, and planets are cold, dark, and small. And that assumption makes planets go this way and stars go this way. What they should have done is realize that when the star cools and dies, it becomes the planet. But you see, if that's an assumption of that parent organization, they're not going to want it because guess what? Everything else that they know is built off of that root assumption. So you take out the floor of the building, guess what happens to the building? Yeah. It just collapses completely. So, yeah, that's basically what it really amounts to. And why Dissent is so dangerous. And why they try to get out all the dissenters while they're in college and while they're in graduate school. They weed them all out. They don't want to have people in there questioning the root assumptions of the parent organization, because then it would be threatening careers and people's ability to put food on the table. It would be threatening egos, and there would be a lot of hatred, and it just would not be pretty at all. Which is why, thank God, when I made this discovery, my income did not rely on me believing in the same assumptions of scientific organizations. I was completely detached from them. If I was inside of those organizations, I guarantee you I wouldn't have spoke up about it. But now, since I'm outside of those organizations, my income, my way of life, are not resting on them. So, which gives me a whole hell of a lot more power, especially combined with the fact that I have YouTube and I have Vixra to publish a lot of my random writings, and I have people such as Charles Nono and Bill Gates and a whole bunch of other people that I don't want to name in this video, but they are dissenters as well. And I am going to support them in their journeys, even though I may not agree with what everybody else has to say about certain matters. But I do know there needs to be some kind of cohesion between these dissenters. We need to work together and get all these ideas in one place. But basically, I think that sums up this talk. Today is February 13th, 2015. It's Friday the 13th. So hopefully today can be a good luck day for me or something. I don't know.